The moment you start healing, controlling people often stop pretending they ever wanted your best. They liked your pain when it made you easier to guilt, rush, confuse, and control. They were comfortable when you apologized first, explained everything, and doubted your own instincts. But healing changes your pace, your tone, your availability, and that threatens the system they built around you. You start pausing before answering. You stop volunteering access. You notice what used to slide. And suddenly the person who seemed manageable becomes colder, louder, meaner, or weirdly desperate. That shift is not random, and it definitely does not mean healing is hurting you. It usually means your healing is interrupting a pattern that used to benefit them. A lot of people learn this the hard way after finally finding peace. They expect support, distance, maybe even respect, and instead they get backlash. A parent gets offended because you stop answering every guilt-soaked phone call immediately. A boss suddenly becomes nitpicky when you stop staying late to prove loyalty. A friend goes cold when you stop sharing private details. They always weaponize later. An ex reappears with concern the second you finally seem calm without them. And because you're healing, you notice something you missed before. Escalation reveals the real dynamic. Before that moment, control often hides inside normal-looking routines, favors, expectations, and fake closeness. It sounds like help, concern, family duty, teamwork, honesty, loyalty, or just being close. But once your nervous system starts settling, your eyes get better at spotting pressure. You start hearing the hidden demand inside the sweet voice and the loaded question. You realize their disappointment always required your sacrifice, your delay, your compliance, your emotional labor. And when you stop supplying that, they don't feel inspired, and they feel deprived. That's why they get worse. Not because your healing is selfish, because access is shrinking. Most controlling people can tolerate your growth as long as it changes nothing practical. They can praise therapy talk, self-care, or boundaries if you're still available on demand. They love healed language when your schedule, money, attention, and silence still belong to them. What they cannot tolerate is healed behavior that actually removes their shortcut into you. That's when the guilt trips sharpen, the victim act deepens, and their stories change. Suddenly you're ungrateful, difficult, cold, disrespectful, distant, selfish, dramatic, or somehow impossible to please. Notice how fast your healing gets renamed as cruelty by someone who benefited from confusion. Healthy people may not love every boundary, but they can handle one without war. They might need adjustment, they might ask questions, but they don't punish you for limits. A controlling person treats your boundary like betrayal because it blocks convenience, leverage, or control. They hear no and translate it into humiliation because they expected automatic access. They hear pause and experience it as resistance because you're no longer easy to steer. They hear silence and panic because they cannot read, manage, or redirect your next move. And that is where so many people get tricked during healing again. They assume the backlash means they are doing something wrong, becoming harsh, or losing compassion. But backlash is often just exposure. The mask slips when the old access disappears. The sweeter you used to be, the more shocking this revelation can feel. Because maybe you were not weak, maybe you were simply heavily trained. Trained to answer quickly, smooth tension, rescue moods, soften truth, and anticipate emotional weather. Trained to call self-abandonment kindness, and call anxiety love, and call obedience peace. So when healing teaches you to slow down, your entire relationship map starts changing. The controlling people notice first, because they were benefiting most from the old version. They can feel the difference before you even explain it out loud. Your voice gets flatter, your apologies get shorter, your availability starts having actual edges. You stop rushing to fix the discomfort they create, and that changes everything. Here's what most people miss. Controlling behavior often gets uglier right before it loses power. That doesn't make the situation safe, but it does make the pattern easier to read. A boss who once acted supportive starts documenting tiny mistakes after you stop overperforming. They don't hate your growth. They hate losing unpaid labor, emotional cushioning, and easy control. A mother who says she worries about you may really mean she misses control. When you stop telling her everything, she suddenly says you're secretive, rude, and selfish. What changed was not your love. What changed was her access to your inner life. A fake friend will act wounded when you stop sharing details they pass around. They will call you distant, while quietly resenting that they can no longer study you. Because to some people, information is intimacy only when it benefits them. To them, your openness was not sacred. It was useful. That difference matters. And once you see that, you stop confusing exposure with connection again. Healing makes that distinction clear, which is why controlling people often scramble harder. Some scramble with anger. Some scramble with tears. Some scramble with fake innocence. Some suddenly need emergencies every time you set a limit or become unavailable. Some bring up everything they've ever done for you the second you say no. That's not proof you are cruel. That's proof the old bargain is ending. The unspoken bargain was simple. You absorb the pressure, and they keep feeling comfortable. Healing breaks that deal, often without one dramatic conversation, just through changed energy and choices. You stop chasing. You stop decoding every silence. You stop begging for clean communication. You stop defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. That alone changes the field. Because controlling people rely on your need to be seen as fair. They know if they act confused enough, you may over-explain and hand them more material. That's why one of the strongest healing moves is saying less, not more. Not because silence is magic, but because over-explaining feeds people who twist your words. If you say, "That doesn't work for me," and they push, that is information. If you say, "My answer is the same," and they keep circling, that matters. If you say, "I'm not discussing this," and they call you cold, notice that. A healthy person may dislike the boundary, but they can still hear language. A controlling person hears any limit as disobedience because compliance was their version of closeness. And this is where guilt becomes their favorite weapon after you start recovering. They remind you how stressed they are, how much they sacrificed, how alone they feel. None of that automatically makes the request reasonable or the pressure loving. Real need can exist. Manipulation can also exist. Sometimes both are present. That is an important nuance because not every difficult person is toxic. Some people are stressed, clumsy, wounded, or emotionally immature without being deliberately strategic. But even emotional immaturity can become harmful when it keeps demanding your self-abandonment. Intent matters, but impact matters too, especially if the pattern repeats after clear limits. So you do not need a diagnosis to trust the damage done. You do not need courtroom proof to admit a relationship keeps straining your mind. You need honesty about patterns, consequences, and what it costs you to keep participating. Sometimes the smartest move is not confrontation. Sometimes it is strategy, distance, and timing. Because a controlling person does not always become safer just because you became clearer. In some families, direct honesty only gives them better words to attack you with. In some workplaces, confronting the manipulator too early invites retaliation before you have support. So healing is not always loud. Sometimes healing looks like being less available. Sometimes it looks like documenting everything, answering only in writing, and staying professionally flat. Sometimes it looks like leaving no emotional fingerprints for them to grab. You don't have to win the argument to break the pattern. You just stop feeding it. That may mean a simple no, without a speech attached to make it easier. It may mean I'm available during work hours, when your boss keeps testing access. It may mean I already answered that, when someone keeps reopening settled decisions. It may mean we're not doing this, when the conversation turns into a trap. Notice these phrases are short. That is not weakness. That is self-protection. Long explanations often come from good intentions, but manipulators use them like loose threads. They pull one sentence, ignore the rest, and drag you into defending yourself forever. Short truth gives them less to bend, bait, or repackage against you later. And your nonverbal choices matter just as much as your words do. Pause before answering. Keep your tone flat. Do not rescue the silence they created. Do not rush to prove you are kind after setting a limit. Do not soften your no until it becomes a yes with nicer packaging. Hold eye contact briefly if needed, then return to calm instead of performance. Controlling people study your flinch. They listen for fear, guilt, and the urge to fix. When that urge stops running the room, their behavior often gets more obvious. That does not mean you caused the ugliness. It means you stopped cushioning it. This is especially painful when the controlling person once seemed loving, funny, generous, or protective. Because then you grieve two losses at once, the relationship and the story. The story said they cared. The pattern says they cared most when you were easiest. That is a brutal truth, but it is also deeply freeing now. Because once you stop begging reality to look nicer, you can finally protect yourself. You stop waiting for perfect wording to make an unreasonable person become reasonable. You stop performing loyalty to people who only feel safe when you were small. You stop calling the backlash proof that you should return to old behavior. Instead, you read the backlash correctly. Anger can mean loss of control. Guilt trips can mean lost access. Silent treatment can mean punishment disguised as distance. Smear campaigns can mean image control after private control no longer works. Fake concern can mean information gathering. You changed can mean you stopped being easy. Once you understand the translation, you stop absorbing every accusation at face value. You start asking a better question. What access did this person just lose? That question will explain more than their speech ever does to you. Maybe they lost after-hours access to your mind, phone, or schedule. Maybe they lost the ability to dump feelings into you and call it closeness. Maybe they lost your instant reassurance, your constant availability, or your automatic yes. Maybe they lost the version of you that ignored your own pain to keep peace. And people who felt entitled to that version rarely release it gracefully. This is why healing can feel lonelier before it feels freer. You are not just losing chaos, you are losing roles, illusions, and false belonging. But false belonging always charges interest, and eventually the bill comes due in your body. Healing is when you stop paying for closeness with confusion, exhaustion, and self-betrayal. You begin choosing peace that does not require pretending, shrinking, or abandoning yourself. And yes, some people will get worse the moment you start doing that. Let them reveal themselves. Your job is not to manage their reaction to your health. Your job is to notice, protect, adjust, and stop bargaining with what hurts you. Maybe that means less contact. Maybe it means firmer work boundaries and less access. Maybe it means grieving a parent you cannot fully trust with your vulnerability. Maybe it means accepting that a friend liked your openness more than your well-being. Maybe it means leaving the conversation earlier instead of staying to be understood. That is not giving up. That is refusing to donate yourself to dysfunction. Remember, a boundary is not control. Control tells others what they are allowed to be. A boundary tells you what you will do when a line is crossed. That difference matters because controlling people often accuse you of control when you self-protect. They call your distance punishment because they want access without accountability still. They call your calm disrespect because chaos used to be the doorway back into you. But calm is powerful. Calm does not mean weak. Calm means you stopped volunteering confusion. Calm means you no longer need their agreement to trust your own experience. Calm means the old hooks are visible now, even if they still sting sometimes. And if they still sting, that does not erase your progress today. It means you are human, and healing is practice, not instant emotional immunity. So the next time someone gets worse because you got healthier, read it clearly. Do not automatically ask, how do I calm them down? Ask what changed. Ask what access ended. Ask what role you stopped performing. Ask what truth surfaced. Because your healing did not create their control. It exposed how much they needed it. And once exposed, you finally have a chance to choose yourself on purpose. If this hits something real for you, name the pattern instead of minimizing it. And if you are ready, practice one short sentence this week and keep it. Protecting your peace does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it sounds like less. And less can save your mind when more only feeds the control. If you want, leave a comment with the phrase you need most right now. And if this voice helps you see clearly, stay close. Peace gets stronger practiced.